Imagine this. You're sitting in a room you've known your whole life, walls painted with memories, corners filled with familiar shadows. The chair beneath you creaks just like it always has. The clock ticks forward like it always does. Outside, the world moves in its predictable rhythm. Morning coffee, work emails, polite nods and tired yawns. You look around and feel like everything is fine, normal, safe, and yet something inside you twitches, an almost imperceptible pull behind your ribs. A sense that something is missing, or worse, something is off. But you dismiss it, you always do. You silence it with a scroll, a snack, a new goal, or a long list of responsibilities. You tell yourself you're lucky. You have things others don't. You've made it, you're functioning, you're alive. But then, one ordinary day, without warning, it hits. A question, soft at first, like a whisper in the dark. Then louder, heavier, unrelenting. What if everything you've been told about life, what it means, what to chase, what to fear, was a lie? Not just the big stuff. Not just religion or politics or love, but the quiet rules, the unspoken scripts, the subconscious habits stitched into your identity since you were a child. What if the way you define success is not yours? What if the emotions you avoid, shame, anger, grief, were actually your compass? What if the roles you play, good daughter, reliable son, ambitious adult, are masks passed down through generations designed to keep you tame, not true? And what if your suffering, your restlessness, anxiety, self-doubt isn't a flaw in you but a symptom of living someone else's version of life? Imagine realizing that your entire personality, your dreams, fears, even the way you sit in a room isn't you at all, but a collection of survival mechanisms, coping strategies, scripts written by people who never knew who you really were. People who, with the best of intentions, handed you a blueprint for a cage. Let that settle. You've spent the first 3 decades of your life running towards something you didn't choose and away from something you never understood. You were praised when you conformed, punished when you questioned, and slowly, without knowing, you built a self that could survive the world, but not one that could feel alive in it. And the scariest part, you didn't notice. You thought you were in control. You thought you had freedom. You thought the choices you made were yours. But how free is a choice when every option was handed to you by someone else? They told you to be realistic, to be nice, to be productive, to chase certainty, to avoid discomfort. They called it growing up, being responsible, fitting in. But what if those were just polite phrases for spiritual sedation? What if you were never meant to fit in? What if your confusion, your numbness, your quiet rage are all evidence of something in you refusing to die? You've been playing a game, one you didn't agree to, one where the rules were made before you could think, and the reward is a quiet, acceptable life that feels just a little more hollow with each passing year. And now here you are, still breathing, still smiling on cue, still paying bills and answering emails and setting goals. But deep down, something in you is screaming, this isn't it. Not because you're ungrateful, not because you're broken, but because a part of you still remembers. The part before the programming, the part before the people-pleasing, the part before you traded curiosity for certainty. So the question isn't whether your life is bad, it's whether it's yours. And if it's not, then who have you been this whole time? If your emotions were filtered, your identity molded, your decisions shaped by expectations you never consented to, then what does that make the last 30 years? A well-designed illusion, a beautiful prison, a dream you never woke up from. And more importantly, if the first 30 years were a lie, what does that mean for the next 30? It's easy to believe that life just turned out this way, that your behaviors, beliefs, and patterns are simply the result of your personality, that you're cautious because you're introverted, that you grind endlessly because you're ambitious, that you numb out because you're just not that emotional. But what if none of those were true? What if the traits you've called you are actually armor? What if your identity was crafted not through choice but through adaptation? You didn't become who you are by accident. You became who you are because it was necessary. When you were young, the world didn't ask who you truly were. It asked, how will you behave so we love you? And slowly, piece by piece, you complied. You studied what earned affection, what triggered rejection, what made people clap, and what made them look away. And then you adjusted. You weren't living, you were auditioning. Psychologist Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But very few people are given that privilege from the start. Because childhood isn't about self-discovery, it's about survival. Your nervous system recorded everything. The tone of a parent's voice when you cried, the tension in the room when you were too loud, too sensitive, too different. You learned, without language, that being fully yourself came with a cost. So you did what all children do. You adapted, you split. You buried parts of yourself that didn't feel safe and wore masks that would keep you loved or at least tolerated. You became the overachiever, the caretaker, The peacemaker, the rebel, the chameleon. And it worked. You survived. You made it to adulthood. But now those masks are suffocating you. You've mistaken performance for personality. But deep inside, you know. You feel it in the silence, in the stillness, in the anxiety that comes out of nowhere. It's the soul's version of phantom limb pain. You're grieving parts of yourself that never got to live. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote about bad faith, the phenomenon of lying to oneself to avoid the weight of true freedom. We pretend we are just our job title, our family role, our trauma response, because stepping outside of that means facing terrifying responsibility. Freedom isn't always liberating, it's paralyzing. Because if you could be anything, then who are you now? And how much of your life was built on a lie? Here's the truth. The lie wasn't just told to you, it was engineered into you. Not by evil masterminds, but by well-meaning people caught in their own illusions. Your parents, teachers, culture, religion, they weren't trying to hurt you. They were just passing on the programming they inherited. They told you not to feel too much, not to want too much, not to dream too big. They said it to protect you, to prepare you for the real world. But in doing so, they built your prison, and they were trapped in it too. Aldous Huxley warned us in Brave New World, it's not totalitarianism that will enslave us, but pleasure, comfort, distraction, conditioning so seamless that we love our servitude, obedience disguised as happiness, emotional sedation sold as mental health. Your conformity was never just about fear, it was about belonging. You learned to trade authenticity for attachment, and the trade worked until it didn't, because there comes a moment in every life when the hunger to belong is overtaken by the hunger to be. That's where you are now. And it's terrifying, because to reclaim yourself means you'll have to lose the self that others accepted. You'll have to disappoint people. You'll have to face emotions you've buried for decades. You'll have to admit that the pain you carry isn't random. It's intelligent. It's a message. It says you were never meant to live like this. Schopenhauer once said that a man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. In other words, you think you're choosing your life, but your choices are driven by forces beneath awareness, unresolved wounds, unspoken expectations, unconscious fears. Your craving for success might be a need to finally feel seen. Your pattern of sabotaging relationships might be a fear of being fully known. Your obsession with self-improvement might be a disguised form of self-rejection. You call it discipline, others call it drive, but maybe it's just a subtle, socially acceptable form of self-abandonment. The scariest realization is that you can build an entire life, career, marriage, social circle on top of who you think you're supposed to be, and it will work. Until one day it doesn't. Until your body starts whispering through fatigue, illness, anxiety. Until your dreams start fading into numbness. Until you feel like a stranger in your own story, because a false self can only carry you so far. And that's not your fault. That's the cost of a system built on control, not truth. Predictability, not presence. Approval, not authenticity. But now you're starting to see, the programming is glitching, the lie is unraveling, and what's underneath it isn't chaos, it's clarity. It's the part of you that never died, the part that watched silently for years, the part that always knew this wasn't quite right. So you ask again, if this isn't who I am, then who am I? Not the version people liked, not the mask that kept you safe, not the productivity machine, or the nice guy, or the perfect woman, but you, the you who wasn't built to be efficient, but to be free. But freedom has a cost, and most people won't pay it, because the lie is comfortable, predictable, familiar. Truth? It's messy, lonely, often painful, but it's yours. And the moment you begin to question the lie, that's when everything starts to shift. You didn't notice it at first. The erosion was subtle, like a slow leak in the back of your mind. You still laughed at jokes, you still posted pictures, you still went to dinner, nodded in meetings, said I'm fine without skipping a beat. But somewhere in the spaces between those things, you started to disappear. The truth is, most people don't wake up one morning and realize their life is a lie. That kind of clarity doesn't crash down like a lightning bolt. It builds like rust. Quiet, corrosive, invisible from the outside. It happens when you say yes to things you don't mean, when you smile through situations that make your stomach turn, when you try to rest but can't because guilt whispers that you're being lazy. These aren't random stress responses, they're echoes of a deeper fracture. You learned early on that being accepted was more important than being honest, so you got good at playing the part, and slowly your nervous system rewired itself around the performance. Now you can't tell the difference between your real self and your conditioned self. This is the invisible damage. It doesn't show up as bruises or breakdowns, it shows up as a chronic unease, a spiritual anemia, a sense of always running towards something or away from something, but never with yourself. Cognitive psychology has a name for part of this, cognitive dissonance, the tension that comes from holding two opposing truths. And for you, that dissonance sounds like, Rondon, I have everything I thought I wanted. Why am I still not fulfilled? I should be grateful, but something feels off. Everyone sees me as confident, so why do I feel like a fraud? This isn't imposter syndrome, it's soul dislocation. Your outer life doesn't match your inner truth. Neurologically, your brain responds to this mismatch the same way it does to danger. The amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, your body thinks you're under threat, not because of the outside world, but because of the lie you're living in. And society, it makes it worse. We live in a world that rewards exhaustion and punishes reflection. A world obsessed with appearance but allergic to authenticity. It tells you that happiness is a purchase, that rest is laziness, that silence is awkward, that emotions are problems to solve, not messages to listen to. So you keep running. You fill your calendar, you crush goals, you numb with screens, you self-medicate with validation, because stillness is terrifying. It might reveal the emptiness underneath. And in that chaos, you lose things. Not all at once, but over time, you lose your joy, your creativity, your connection to wonder, your ability to just be without performing. Relationships become surface level. Small talk replaces real talk. Vulnerability feels risky. Intimacy becomes transactional. You find yourself surrounded by people who don't really see you because you've never shown them who you are. The cost of the lie, isolation, even when you're never alone. And then there's the emotional toll. You begin to feel things you don't understand. Not because you're broken, but because suppressed truth always returns through the back door of the psyche. Grief disguised as anxiety. Rage disguised as fatigue. Longing disguised as procrastination. You try to fix the symptoms, productivity hacks, morning routines, self-help books, but you never question the system beneath them. The system that taught you that being good meant being obedient, that being strong meant being numb, that being successful meant being exhausted. Here's the thing, your body remembers everything your mind tries to forget, so it rebels. In the form of panic attacks that show up out of nowhere, or burnout that no amount of vacation fixes, or emotional numbness so deep you forget what it feels like to care. You think you need more motivation. You don't. You need a funeral for the self you built to survive. And it's not just you. Look around. A culture obsessed with performance. Young adults with chronic health problems. Middle-aged professionals who feel hollow inside. Families that talk but never communicate. Schools that reward memorization over meaning. Workplaces that demand productivity over presence. This is not a coincidence. This is what happens when millions of people grow up in environments that teach them who to be, not how to be. We've created a world where truth is unsafe and silence is unbearable. So we run, and we crash, and we wonder why it feels like nothing is ever enough. Here's why. Because nothing outside of you can fill the void left by the parts of you you've abandoned. You've been lied to in 1,000 subtle ways. By memory, that your worth is tied to your output, that emotions are inconvenient. By memory, that self-sacrifice is noble. By memory, and the longer you live by these lies, the more lost you become. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Philosopher Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once said, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." We don't have a crisis of happiness, we have a crisis of meaning, and meaning doesn't come from doing more, it comes from facing the truth. Even if it breaks your heart, even if it costs you friends, even if it means walking away from the identity you spent decades building, because the alternative is what you have now. Numbness, confusion, a nagging sense that you're meant for something more, but can't quite name it. So the real question isn't, how do I feel better? It's what am I avoiding? And more than that, what would happen if I stopped avoiding it? That's the threshold you're standing on, not a breakdown, not even a midlife crisis, but the calling of your most honest self buried beneath years of performance, programming and pain. The question is, will you answer it? You don't need another routine, another morning checklist, another book on how to be more disciplined, productive or liked. You need a revolution, not against the world, but against the version of yourself you've been forced to become. Because if the first 30 years of your life were shaped by fear, performance, and invisible contracts, then breaking free won't be a tidy process. It won't come with applause. It won't be instantly gratifying, but it will be real. And reality, even when it hurts, is freedom. The first step, you stop pretending. You stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You stop nodding in conversations that bore you. You stop laughing at jokes that don't feel funny. You stop saying yes to things that make your body say no. It sounds small, petty, even, But it's not. Every time you override your truth, your nervous system registers betrayal. And every time you honor your truth, even silently, you begin stitching yourself back together. You don't owe the world a polished version of your suffering. You don't need to justify your exhaustion. You don't need permission to fall apart. In fact, falling apart might be the first honest thing you've done in years. Because rebellion isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like rest, like slowness, like saying, I actually don't want to do this anymore. That's the start. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Freedom requires grief. You will grieve the version of you who worked so hard to be accepted. The achiever, the pleaser, the fixer. You will feel guilty for walking away from the life you built around other people's expectations. You'll feel like you're letting people down. And you are. You are letting them down gently, so you can finally lift yourself up. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege doesn't come free. It costs you everything false, everything borrowed, everything you faked just to feel safe. You have to disobey your programming. That means questioning your internal voice. When it says data, you'll be alone if you change. You're too much. A date, you're not enough. You should be grateful. You're not enough. A two, you should be grateful. Don't make a scene. A too late. These aren't your thoughts. They're echoes. You inherited them from tired parents, from broken teachers, from insecure bosses, from a culture obsessed with order. And now, for maybe the first time, you get to ask, is any of this even true? If it's not, drop it. That's how rebellion starts. Not by changing the world, but by changing what you believe you owe it. Start with your beliefs. Productivity nears worth, busyness near importance, but in everyone nears kindness, success nears belonging. Now take a deeper breath, because the rebellion is not just internal, it's relational, social, structural. You'll notice people pulling away. You'll notice discomfort in conversations that once felt familiar. You'll be misunderstood. But understand this, being misunderstood isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're no longer performing. Your life is shedding its costume. Let it, and start surrounding yourself with people who speak the language of truth, not comfort. People who ask, how does that feel, instead of what will people think? Read The Rebels, Nietzsche, who warned that morality is often just disguised obedience. Schopenhauer, who said most suffering comes from chasing illusions. Huxley, who predicted a future where we'd be controlled not by pain, but pleasure. And then look at the few who broke free. Doa, people who left careers that looked perfect on paper. Artists who started over at 40. Men who learned to cry. Died women who stopped shrinking. Died were anyone who chose integrity over image, even when it cost them everything. These people don't glow with certainty. They radiate clarity. They look like they've lost everything, until you realize they've found something unbreakable, themselves. They stopped asking how to fix themselves. They stopped apologizing for their instincts. They stopped performing grief and started feeling it. They stopped trying to be lovable and started being real. That's the difference. You don't rebuild your life from the outside in. You rebuild it from the inside out, from the wreckage, from the parts of you that still hurt when the world is quiet, from the questions that don't have neat answers. And no, you don't need to know who you are yet. You just need to start unbecoming who you are not. That means slowing down when your mind screams for a dopamine hit. It means listening to your anger instead of swallowing it. It means doing nothing, just to remember what you want to do. It means being radically honest, even if your voice shakes. And most of all, it means forgiving yourself for not waking up sooner, for falling for the lie, for hurting people while you were hurting. You didn't fail. You were surviving. But now you're not just surviving, you're waking up. And every time you say no to the script, every time you tell the truth instead of the polite version, you rewrite your future. You start to build a life that's ugly, honest, alive. One where your emotions aren't problems. They're signals. Where your relationships aren't transactions. They're mirrors. Where your work isn't your identity. It's an expression. Where rest isn't indulgent. It's sacred. And most importantly, where you aren't a brand, a function, a role, but a human being who is finally coming home to themselves. So no, The rebellion won't look the way you expected. It won't make sense to most people. But you're not most people anymore. You're the one who saw the glitch in the matrix. Now the question is, are you ready for the truth behind it all? It's not what you think. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks or standing on a mountain or hearing a voice from the sky. It doesn't come with music or some cinematic rush. That's what you were sold by movies and motivational speakers. Real freedom is quiet. It feels like sitting in a room by yourself and no longer needing to escape. It feels like waking up without dread. It feels like laughing and realizing you're not performing. It feels like saying no and not needing to explain why. The great truth: you were never broken. You were buried. Everything you've been chasing, confidence, clarity, peace, purpose, was never outside of you. It was inside, waiting, covered by years of noise, fear, roles, and rules. You didn't need to become someone else. You needed to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that remembering, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single moment. It's a series of tiny, quiet awakenings. The breath you take after telling the truth for the first time. The feeling of peace when you stop trying to impress someone. The first moment you sit with pain without trying to solve it. The day you look in the mirror and stop trying to improve what was never flawed to begin with. This is the final realization. Your suffering wasn't a sign of failure. It was a signal. A message from your deeper self that said, this isn't me. Every panic attack, every burnout, every sudden urge to run away wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakout, a spiritual SOS. You weren't malfunctioning. You were resisting the lie. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, all truth passes through three phases. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. That applies to your personal truth too. At first, you denied it. Then you fought it. Now, if you're brave, you accept it. And the moment you accept it, something shifts. You stop seeking permission. You stop looking for signs. You stop waiting for the perfect time. You realize you were the key the whole time. Every time you asked for clarity, the universe handed you discomfort, because discomfort is clarity in disguise. Pain strips away illusions. Loneliness reveals your true values. Emptiness points to misalignment. All of it was guiding you home, not to some enlightened version of you, but to the real you. The messy, raw, wild, intuitive, creative, inconvenient, loving, wounded, miraculous version. The one who knew, even as a child, that something about the world felt off. You weren't wrong. The world is off. It teaches conformity over curiosity. It confuses obedience with morality. It rewards you for abandoning your instincts. And when you suffer from it, it tells you to work harder. But now, you see that the system was never built for truth. It was built for control. And yet inside that system, you've carved out a space, a clearing, a breath, a choice. You can start again, not from zero, but from truth. You're not late, you're right on time, because this moment, this exact one, is the one you were always moving towards. The moment you decide to stop running, to stop proving, to stop hiding, to stop betraying yourself in the name of being good. Because there is no reward for dying loyal to a version of you that was built to be palatable. You weren't born to be palatable. You were born to be whole. And wholeness isn't perfection. It's integration. It's holding the scared child and the angry teenager and the tired adult all in one breath and saying, you're allowed to be here. It's no longer asking, what should I do? And instead asking, what do I know? Because you do know. You've always known. But your knowing was drowned out by shoulds and scripts and survival instincts. Until now the noise has quieted, the mask has cracked, and you're standing in a rare moment of raw, unfiltered clarity. So here's what I want to tell you. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You need to reclaim yourself. The self that danced before she was told how to look. The self that played before he was told what to be. The self that felt deeply before it was shamed. The self that imagined wildly before the rules came in. That self is not gone. It's just been waiting for the collapse, waiting for the grief, waiting for the moment you'd be brave enough to say, I'm done pretending. And from that moment forward, your life is no longer a performance. It's a prayer, not to some deity in the clouds, but to the truth within you. A quiet vow to no longer abandon yourself, to speak even when your voice trembles, to rest even when the world demands motion, to love without armor, to feel without filter, to live without the lie. And if you ever forget again, which you will, come back to this. Your job is not to become more. Your job is to unbecome what was never you. Every truth that once terrified you will become your compass. Every tear you once swallowed will become your baptism. Every step you take back to yourself will echo with the sound of freedom. This is not the end. This is your beginning, the real one. So exhale. Your